Up, and we'll be discussing the details with a host of people who really know their stuff. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Good afternoon. This is your news at 1 o'clock. The Prime Minister has defended last night's vote on COVID measures brought before Parliament, saying it was won with Conservative support. More than 100 Tory MPs voted against the government's Plan B coronavirus measures, which included COVID passes. However, the legislation still passed with support from Labour. At Prime Minister's questions, the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, said last night's vote showed that Boris Johnson was too weak to lead the country.
So will the Prime Minister take time this Christmas to look in the mirror and ask himself whether he has the trust and authority to lead this country?
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We won that vote last night with Conservative votes, as I told the House. I respect the feelings and I respect the anxieties that colleagues have about. Of course I do. I respect and understand the anxieties, the legitimate anxieties that colleagues have about restrictions on their liberty. But I believe, and on the liberty of people. But I believe that the approach that we're taking is balanced and proportionate and right for this country.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson is facing further backlash after photo evidence emerged of a Tory Christmas party during lockdown last year. This image has come to light, showing 24 people in a room at Westminster HQ for an event organised by former mayoral candidate Sean Bailey's team. The Mirror says Mr Bailey quit as chair of the London Assembly's Police and Crime Committee after being approached about the photo. It's also claimed Number 10 staff were told to leave via a back door after taking part in Boris Johnson's Downing Street quiz last Christmas. For the third day, lateral flow tests are unavailable to order on the UK government website. Instead, it advises people to collect them from pharmacies or collection points. All over 18s are now able to book their booster jab if their second vaccine was 3 months ago, however. In other news, the cost of living has surged this month as inflation reached its highest level in a decade. The Consumer Price Index is up to 5.1% this month, up from 4.2% in October, according to the Office for National Statistics. The increase was led by a steep rise in fuel prices, as well as clothing, food and second-hand cars.
So it is high, and again, if you look at what's happening with wages, which you published yesterday, although in October wages were increasing above the rate of inflation by about 1.7%, having higher inflation, if all things being equal, it may be that actually wages are going to start going either at or slightly below inflation over the next few months.
One person has died and a number of others are unaccounted for after a fire at a property in Reading last night. A 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and arson. Police and fire crews were called to a large blaze in Grovelands Road. One resident said he had a miracle escape by jumping from the third floor of the burning building. A campaigner has lost a challenge against the government over gender-neutral passports. Christy Ellen Kane pushed for more than 25 years to achieve legal and social recognition for non-gendered identity. In a case, it has reached the highest court in the land. However, the Supreme Court found that UK law doesn't recognise a non-gendered category of individual, and allowing X passports would cause legal issues in confirming an individual's identity. Therefore, they unanimously denied the case. 7 times Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton has been knighted by the Prince of Wales today for his services to motorsports. It's just days after the British sports star controversially lost out on a record 8th F1 world title. The 36-year-old attended the investiture at Windsor Castle. Well, those are the top stories. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. Now, though, let's return to On the Money.
And this is On the Money. Inflation hits 5.1% in November as fuel prices, utilities and the price of used cars soars. The cost of living's rising, but for many of us, wages aren't keeping up. We'll discuss what that means for households, businesses and also for the Bank of England, which has to decide tomorrow if interest rates should go up. Plus, It's 2 weeks since Storm Arven caused devastation across the northeast. We'll be hearing from farmers in Northumberland who are still feeling the business impact of that heavy weather in their rural communities. Plus, house prices in October were 10.2% higher than the same month in 2020, the third successive month of double-digit growth. The average home, though, cost slightly less in October than in September, amid signs the market slowed down after the stamp duty holiday was scrapped. We'll be discussing the pros and cons of rising house prices with a bunch of experts. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, solutions, suggestions. What do you think of today's debate here on The Money? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @GBNews. Stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on The Money. Now, the Consumer Price Index soared 5.1% during the 12 months to November, up from 4.2% the month before. Inflation's now at a 10-year high and more than 2.5 times the Bank of England's 2% target. We're in the midst of a major and accelerating cost of living crisis, with the November inflation number driven by record prices for fuel, utilities, clothes and food. On the Money's been warning about high inflation for months, and now it's happening. The question now is, the Bank of England finally listening? Petrol prices jumped to their highest ever level last month, hitting £1.50 per litre in some areas. Filling up costs more not only due to high oil prices, but also supply chain issues, including that lack of HGV drivers, making fuel processing and distribution more expensive. The cost of used cars is also soaring amidst huge demand. Factory closures during lockdown, particularly in the Far East, have generated an acute shortage of microprocessors, reducing the supply of new cars. Energy prices are also high for both households and firms, given the spiralling cost of wholesale gas, still used to generate around 2/5 of UK electricity. So the Consumer Price Index, representing the price of a typical basket of goods, was 5.1% higher in November than the same month in 2020. That's up from 4.2% in October, and inflation was 3.1% the month before. During November, used cars were 27% more expensive than the same month last year. Crikey! With petrol more than 28% higher. Electricity and gas bills were 23% up on November 2020 and are set to rise again when that price cap is readjusted next spring. But while headline CPI inflation is 5.1%, the highest for 10 years, the Retail Price Index, or RPI, shows inflation at, wait for it, 7.1%. That's a 30-year high. And RPI inflation is used to baseline increases in the price of road tax, air passenger duty, student loan repayments, by the way, many mobile phone contracts, and a host of taxes and contracts. So inflation is now way ahead of target and could yet get higher. The Bank of England will announce its latest interest rate decision tomorrow, and while a rise from today's ultra-low level of 0.1% was widely expected, the impact of Omicron and related restrictions on the economy means financial markets in recent days have started to expect rates to remain on hold once more. I say that's wrong. An interest rate shift from 0.1 to 0.25% would have no significant economic impact, but it would signal the bank is finally on the case when it comes to tackling inflation. For the bank to do nothing when the inflation rate starts with a 5 would seriously dent its fast diminishing credibility, in my view. But this is a debate show, and I'm here, like you, hopefully, to hear a range of views. So that's your On the Money question today. Can the Bank of England afford not to raise rates tomorrow? It's On the Money. We have grown-up discussions with people who really know their stuff. We have James Broome. He's the senior economist at Make UK. That's an organisation which represents manufacturers across the UK. Great to have you with us, James. In the studio, two people well known to viewers of On the Money. It's John Longworth, chairman of the Independent Business Network of Family Businesses, used to run the British Chamber of Commerce, of course, and Justin Urquhart-Stewart, co-founder of Regionally, On the Money's very own Gordon Gekko. James, let's go to you first, because You're the guy out there dealing with companies in the real world. 5.1% CPI inflation. We've got input price inflation that's double digits. Factories are paying more for all kinds of inputs. This CPI number, it won't surprise you.
No, good afternoon, Liam. And it doesn't surprise us. I think the news that came out today as well, alongside the inflation figures around the producer price inflation, as you mentioned, that's in double digits at 14.3%. And that's the figure the manufacturing industry is really going to be looking at. They've been feeling this for the past few quarters now. It's only growing. It's up to 14.3% from 13.7%. And it's that gap between CPI that we see at a very high level of 5.2. But it's likely, given this high inflation in the producer input side, that the pressure on that consumer inflation is going to continue and likely to continue right the way into the first half of next year. Manufacturers are dealing with price rises for consecutive quarters. Indeed, in our own research, we've seen record high figures for price levels and increasing price levels for the past 3 consecutive quarters. And so it's become very, very normal in industry now, especially in business-to-business negotiations, that if your suppliers haven't raised your prices, they're expecting a 10% price increase. And that's phenomenal that such an intense price increase is just roundly expected now between businesses.
Here you go, gents, in the studio. This is when economic theory suddenly becomes real. We just heard there from James Broome, somebody with very close connections with a whole host of UK manufacturers. That's his job. And he used the phrase, producers are expecting price. There's those inflation expectations, right, John? They're now in the system. Yeah. Surely the Bank of England has to do something.
Yeah, surely the Bank of England has to do something. You're absolutely right. I'm not going to argue with that at all. I was a person who called for no increase in interest rates during the whole of the period of the financial crisis and its aftermath.
John, just hold it there for one moment because we're just having trouble with your mic. Justin, right. We'll sort that out in 1 second. My apologies. Justin, let me put that same question to you. Do you think the Bank of England now needs to do something?
His answer is more interesting than mine, probably, anyway. No, yes, it does. Not so much that a move from 0.1 to 0.2 is going to make any difference. It's irrelevant. It's policy change. It's actually saying we have changed course. This is what's going to be happening now. Rates have already gone up. Look at the mortgage rates being offered. They've already changed. So actually, this is about credibility. Or are we going to be the Grand Old Duke of York going up and down the hill the entire time?
Let's just go back to James Broome. James, talk us through the realities of input price, producer price inflation, which you mentioned there, in double digits, 14.3% in November. What does that look like on the ground in terms of the members of Make UK, your organisation?
They were experiencing, the industry was experiencing these heightened price pressures, but there was a reluctance to pass those prices on back then. This is understandably straight after the UK's exit from the EU proper. So there was the industry didn't want to risk its competitiveness. So it was soaking up those margins, those increased input costs, and not passing it on to customers, whether that be final end users or indeed suppliers within the supply chain. Now, as it's largely expected that these pressures are going to continue right the way through into next year, which was never thought to be the case, perhaps in the second quarter of this year, that they have to pass these prices on. And what we're seeing is a tidal wave of sorts of manufacturers realizing that it's not harming their competitiveness. It's happening all across the world. It's indeed happening in Europe as well, our largest trading partner for manufactured goods. And so it's carte blanche to raise one's prices, to gain back some of those margins that have been so under attack. Indeed over the past year, but indeed over the past 2 years during the pandemic.
Hopefully now you can be heard.
Okay.
Give me your thoughts on this 5.1% CPI inflation number, the 7.1% retail price index number.
Serious challenge. As I was saying, I was one of the people who said no rise in interest rates during the financial crisis.
You did?
Post-period. Now it's a completely different situation. The bank has to get a hold of this before inflation gets out of hand and runs away. That's a very dangerous situation. However, having said that, my expectation is if the government and the bank do the right things, that inflation will top out at about 5.5%, and then start to reduce during next year. Problem is, the government have actually done things and the bank have done things that have made things worse. The government have chosen to have a net zero policy using the most expensive route to net zero that you can possibly imagine. So they really need to rethink that very carefully. There's been some regulatory errors that have allowed petrol pricing in the UK to rise because the price setter in petrol pricing has disappeared. So that's a big issue. Of course, businesses are, to some extent, profiteering because they want to regain the losses that they've actually experienced
using this
during
opportunity
COVID.
to raise prices because
Correct.
everybody expects prices to rise.
Yeah, it's a bit like decimalisation.
Yeah.
You know, nobody
Yeah,
knows
yeah.
the value of anything; it will
Yeah.
fire away. So there's all that going on. The government, of course, really need to reset the economy now. They need to have lower taxes, deregulation, and access to finance. The Bank of England needs to stop any QE activity because it's
The quantitative easing, money printing.
precisely, it's just raising asset values and actually exacerbating the whole issue of levelling up, the difference between the haves and the have-nots. All those things are wrong. The government's going in entirely the wrong direction on those things. So it's going to make it worse.
Let me put a counter view to you, Justin, for the purposes of debate. We saw the graphic there in my introduction, used car prices up 27%, etc., etc. That's because of a shortage of semiconductors. We all know that. If the Bank of England raises rates, that's not going to help semiconductor manufacturing in China to reboot to pre-pandemic levels, is it?
No, frankly, this rate rise won't make any particular difference at all. Yes, it's a little bit of cost. In terms of private individuals, well, the cost of their mortgages will have changed anyway.
Yeah.
But actually, when it comes to businesses, this is so small. No. This is, if they don't do anything, the word you used before, credibility.
Yeah.
They've been losing credibility. They need to be seen to be taking some action here, because otherwise people just say, you're irrelevant.
And we're old enough, aren't we, to know what happens when a Bank of England, when a central bank does lose credibility.
Oh, God, yeah.
That's when inflation really takes off.
And then they find who's actually in control, who's got the power to do anything about it. And of course, add to this as well, a currency which has now been weakening very significantly. Why? Again, confidence. If people don't like what actually the Treasury is doing at the moment, the pound gets it.
The pound could get hammered then. I mean, maybe if it looks as if the Bank of England is never going to raise interest rates, then that will push down on the pound, right?
Yep.
Very interesting. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. We will keep this discussion going after the break with James Broome, who's from Make UK, representing UK manufacturers, with John Longworth, former boss of the British Chamber of Commerce, with Justin Urquhart-Stewart, co-founder of Regionally Plus. We'll be looking at how farming communities are still recovering or trying to recover from Storm Arwen up there in the north-east of England. So stay with us. You're On the Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Most of the country having a dry day today. There's a little bit of rain here and there, but in the outlook, much of the UK will stay dry into the weekend and perhaps beyond. But it is going to turn colder and increasingly we're going to see fog patches. This weather front is providing some rain today and tomorrow, but this large area of high pressure is moving in, and that is why it is turning drier for all of us really from Thursday onwards. Back to today, though, there's some patchy rain from that weather front over Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, the far northwest of England. Some sunny spells over Yorkshire, down into Lincolnshire, parts of the North Midlands, but generally cloudy across the south. Good spells of sunshine across the north. Just 1 or 2 showers around the middle of the day in Shetland. Temperatures above average as well. Another mild day, especially in the south. 13, a 14 is just about possible. We'll keep some outbreaks of rain, though, going across southwest Scotland, the north of Northern Ireland into this evening. That rain just trickling northwards as we go through the night, so becoming dry across northwest England. Maybe the odd spot of rain over the mountains in North Wales, but generally a dry night, where skies are clearest across parts of northeast England. Pockets of frost possible. Certainly some fog is likely in this area, parts of East Yorkshire, North Yorkshire down into Lincolnshire. And if we do see some fog, it could last for most of Thursday. Generally, though, it's just going to be a cloudy but dry day. Some rain in the far north of Scotland, certainly initially, but even here that's pushing away to the north as the breeze picks up. Eastern parts, so northeast England, eastern Scotland, seeing the best of any sunny spells as long as that fog does clear. And again, temperatures perhaps not quite as high as today, but still on the mild side for the time of year. Not a great deal of change during Thursday. The high pressure is moving in, so a lot of dry weather. Where we see breaks in the cloud, we could see some pockets of frost and, again, some fog patches forming. And that's going to be the issue of the next few days and into the weekend. A lot of dry weather, a lot of cloud, but there will be some fog. And where that fog sticks, well, it really will feel pretty cold.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Today we're talking inflation. That's because Consumer Price Index hit a 10-year high of 5.1% in November, we learnt this morning. That's more than 2.5 times the Bank of England's target. So as the cost of living continues to rise, we're debating whether the Bank of England can afford not to raise interest rates when it meets to decide tomorrow. Let's bring in some of your views now. Many emails have come in on this important topic. Steve says, great show. Thanks, Steve. Can someone please explain how raising interest rates would reduce fuel, energy and supply side prices? Well, it won't, Steve, but it's all about the Bank of England's credibility, as we were discussing earlier and we'll continue to discuss now. But it's a good question. Gisborne says, you're so right. Global central bank rates are still at emergency levels despite robust growth and decades of high inflation. This is beyond cretinous. That's a good name for another show. Beyond Cretinous. Maybe the evening version of On the Money. And Janet says, how do they expect pensioners to cope with inflation when their pension is rising by only 3.1%, when our savings are depreciating by up to 7% in 12 months to April next year? Nothing but a negative to make up the shortfall. It's a good question. And how about all those workers who aren't getting wage rises as well? Derek says, great show, my favourite on GB News. Thank you, Derek, my usual fee. The Bank of England is terrified of raising interest rates. People have been allowed to borrow vast sums of money that they will never repay if rates rise significantly. They and the government are terrified of massive house repossessions and bankruptcies. Keep your emails coming. gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet at GB News. I'm still with my panel. James Broome, Senior Economist at Make UK. representing manufacturers across the country. John Longworth used to run the Confederation of British Industry, the British Chamber of Commerce, not that one, John. And he's back again. Justin Urquhart-Stewart, we can't keep him down. He's our very own Gordon Gekko. John, let's go to you. On that question from one of our viewers, as Justin and I were discussing before the break, it won't help to increase the supply of semiconductors, will it? It won't help to increase the supply of new cars, so used cars aren't so expensive, but it is about signalling.
Yeah, signalling, and it will help to stop inflation getting out of hand. You know, I can remember inflation being 25%. Can you imagine that? If you think
that was the late 70s, right?
Yeah, if you think pensioners are going to have a problem and we'll let it go to that, it's going to be horrendous. The only reason the Bank of England's getting away with all the printing of money that it's done is that everybody's been doing it. Because otherwise,
other central banks too, yeah.
Otherwise, the currency would be trashed. You know, we've got to actually maintain the value and credibility of sterling as well. That's a real problem. As far as petrol's concerned, of course, I mean that's a completely separate issue. Somebody should be looking at whether there's coordinated activity or complex monopoly activity going on at the moment, which is allowing price rises because we saw
petrol firms colluding to keep prices high.
Yeah.
Because oil prices have come off slightly from their previous highs, and yet petrol prices have carried on going up.
And we've seen the two big factors in inflation. You said at the beginning of the programme, petrol and energy prices.
Yeah.
You know, energy prices. The government have decided to go for net zero, whether right or wrong. It's very costly, and what they've done is they've done it by the most expensive route, whereas actually they should have a bridge to net zero using gas, fracking, until we've got nuclear on stream, and we see that with the comparison of France and Germany. France has 70-odd% nuclear. Energy prices in France are far lower than Germany. Germany's relying on wind power.
We will come back to James Broom in a moment, Justin, but before we do, let me ask you here in the studio. Yeah, everyone knows what I think. I think interest rates should go up, but again, we like to explore other views. You know, I can imagine being on the MPC now and saying, hang on, folks, we've just been hit with this Omicron restrictions. The economy's going to slow down because of that. Do we really want to be raising rates when the economy's already going to slow down, which will probably take the edge off inflation anyway?
They're terrified. They've seen a recovery come through. We had the sort of V-shaped recovery.
Careful, Winston.
Exactly. And now we're going to get this sort of W shape as it goes up and down. So it's still very weak. The confidence level isn't there. So they're terrified of saying, if we put them up, we're going to destroy the confidence. No, that won't happen because it's such a low level overall. Inflation is a killer for people. The people on their pensions, I just don't mean state pensions, all those people who built up their cash, they bought an annuity, they've got an income coming through, and it gets devalued.
That's right.
Over 2 or 3 years, no, but over a decade or so.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we saw in the 70s, people really being penalised at the wrong end of
So given the inflation that's swirling, given how long the Bank of England's taken to do anything, you're saying put up interest rates. It could harm confidence more to not put up interest rates, because then people would say, well, the Bank of England is clearly out to lunch. It's got its fingers in its ears. We no longer have credible monetary policy.
And the key issue is this. Remember, sterling is still a reserve currency. That's to say, countries use it as part of their reserves.
Yeah, and to store wealth rather than just do transactions.
That's it. And because we're a reserve currency, that allows us to get away with quantitative easing, because people say, oh, we'll trust you, that's fine. Well,
people keep demanding the pound even though we're printing it like Billio.
There comes a stage where the emperor looks somewhat sartorially challenged, and that'll happen when people say, Bank of England, sorry guys, you're not on the money.
That's the thing about finance, isn't it? Nothing changes for a long time and then suddenly everything changes very, very quickly. Let's go back to you, James. Back out there in the field when it comes to British factories, manufacturers employing tens of thousands of people, driving at least a fifth of our economy as you do. What do you think the view is out there? Obviously, lots of manufacturers who have lots of debt won't want to see interest rates going up, but they won't want to see authorities that seem to have given up on inflation either.
To mirror what your panel has been saying in the studio, I do think it's a question of whether or not the MPC does or does not raise rates tomorrow. It's a question of perception, reputation and credibility, and less so about changing the makeup of raw material input pricing for the sector, as I think it's largely understood that these input price pressures are very external. It's a global phenomenon. It's a global supply chain issues, logistics shortages, and indeed at the source, those raw material shortages. And the MPC changing the interest rate isn't going to alleviate that in a significant way. However, it is very important that now, after such a long period of inflation, that it is seen to have gumption, that it is willing to act, to control inflation. I think even a small change, as we've been talking about, won't do much in the way of meaningful impact, apart from in that credibility and perception space. But that's very important, especially on a global scale, and especially for an institution as renowned of a global bank, a global central bank, as it is.
Briefly in the studio, gentlemen, one reason we're worried about inflation is that when inflation really spirals, investment stops, unemployment goes up, the poor get hammered, right, John?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about the 1970s inflation rates. I mean, we're in a perfect storm to be back in the 1970s, not only with inflation, but also with printing of money, with winter of discontent, with wage rises, with supply chain problems, lack of investment, tax rises. It's a vicious circle. And actually, the government's got to break out of that vicious circle and go the other way. Tax cuts, investment, productivity improvement, raise interest rates, send a signal out, stop printing money.
Guys, we've got to leave it there. I'm sorry. Great to talk to you both. And this discussion will no doubt continue. It really is the biggest story in economics at the moment, right? Inflation, the cost of living.
Yep.
You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, as house prices slightly decreased this month, but are still 10.2% higher than last year. Yeah, I'll explain that later, don't worry. We'll be debating the pros and cons of rising house prices. But before that, here's the GB News headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Thank you, Liam. Here are the latest headlines. The Prime Minister has defended last night's vote on COVID measures brought before Parliament, saying it was one with Conservative support. Nearly 100 Tory MPs voted against the government's plans for COVID passes. However, the legislation still passed with support from Labour. The cost of living has surged this month as inflation reached its highest level in a decade. The Consumer Price Index is up to 5.1% this month, up from 4.2% in October. That's according to the Office for National Statistics. The increase was led by a steep rise in fuel prices, as well as clothing, food and second-hand cars. One person has died and a number of others are unaccounted for after a fire at a property in Reading last night. A 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and arson. Police and fire crews were called to a large blaze in Grovelands Road. One resident said he had a miracle escape by jumping from the third floor of the burning building. A campaigner has lost a challenge against the government over gender-neutral passports. Christy Ellen Kane pushed for more than 25 years to achieve legal and social recognition for non-gendered identity. In a case, it has reached the highest court in the land. However, the Supreme Court found that UK law doesn't recognise a non-gendered category of individual, and allowing ex-passports would cause legal issues in confirming an individual's identity. And 7-time Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton has been knighted by the Prince of Wales today for his services to motorsports. It's just days after the British sports star controversially lost out on a record 8th F1 world title. The 36-year-old attended the investiture at Windsor Castle. Well, I'll have more on all of today's main stories at the top of the hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money. Now, house prices continue to rise with the latest figures from a Manchester's Land Registry UK House Price Index report showing the average house price cost $268,000 in October. That's £24,000 more than the same month in 2020. But this October number was slightly down on September because in that month prices soared as people rushed to close deals before the end of the government's stamp duty holiday. So October house prices are up 24 grand on October 2020, but they're slightly down on September. Here's a breakdown. House prices in England were 9.8% higher in October than in October 2020. Northern Ireland saw a 10.7% house price rise, while in Scotland and Wales, the price of an average home was 11.3% and 15.5% higher, respectively, in October compared to October last year. On a regional level, London saw the lowest annual house price rise at 6.2%, while East Midlands saw the highest at 11.7%. So a reversal of the way things usually are, with London having a lower house price increase than much of the rest of the country. Here to discuss the numbers with me, a couple of property people. We got property analyst Russell Quirk here, and we're also joined by developer Richard Black. Welcome to both of you. Richard, let's talk to you first. What do you think of these numbers? 3 successive months of house price growth. I mean, it's getting harder and harder for first-time buyers, isn't it?
It's the best of times and worst of times, to quote Charles Dickens at this time of year. You're seeing if you have an average house price of £270,000, you've earned £27,000 in a year without getting out of bed.
Yeah.
If you don't own a house, you've got to go out and earn an extra £27,000 to buy one. That's the bottom line here. So, as I say, it's the best of times.
And that's 27 grand after tax you've got to own, and your house price rise isn't taxed because it's your principal residence.
So 10% year on year is unsustainable, and I think the market will become unattainable to so many people. It will outsteam itself. It will just fizzle out if we're not careful, if there isn't some degree of control or exertion into it. I mean, just look at those figures, 15.5% for Wales. Yeah. That's unheard of. That's unseen. East Midlands and East Anglia, you quite rightly said, 11.7% and 11.2% respectively. London, historically, as you quite rightly said a moment ago, London historically, if London sneezed, the rest of the UK catches a cold, forgive the pun at the moment. So we've got a situation here where this London, is it petering, is it filtering? But what I'm conscious of, Liam, is what we're buying. 14% of those sales were up 14% for detached homes.
Oh, I see, yeah.
There goes the argument for the race for space, which it's been called. We're leaving London after lockdown. Flats, however, only went up 6%.
Yeah.
So
people want more space, don't they?
Everybody
the
wants
pandemic has changed. Lots of people now feel they can work from home. They don't have to come into London 2 days a week, 3 days a week. Means you can live further away.
The figures represent that. They're quite clearly showing that. Detached homes, 14% increase in prices.
Let's bring Russell Quirk into the conversation. Russell, good to see you as ever, on the money regular. You know what I'm going to say, Russell, because I always say it to you. Here we are, house prices are 270 grand. The average wage is about 30 grand. In other words, you need 9 or 10 times your average income to buy a home. When I bought my first home, the average house price was 3 times the average income. This is unsustainable. In the end, it will not be sustained.
Be going up, would they? Because as we all know from a schoolboy economics perspective, the only thing that drives prices up is an imbalance between demand and supply. So clearly demand is higher than supply. Supply obviously is one side of the problem, particularly in terms of new builds. But here's another stat for you. In amongst all the ONS data today, the biggest increase we've seen in the last 12 months, forget the regional stuff and the fragmented market as it is, new build properties themselves, so houses that are being built brand new and sold, are up 17%. So there's this kind of even further kind of far-reaching growth within the property sector, within the housing market, that is even more pronounced than you've just been discussing with Richard, and that's new builds. Now, of course, a lot of that is fueled not just by the stamp duty holiday, not just by low interest rates, but of course, government intervention, government stimulus, things like the Boris mortgage, things like help to buy rather. So, transactions, by the way, in 2021 so far are 60% higher than 2020. Now, 2020 was an odd year, of course, because we had, the property market closed for 2 or 3 months, but also about 25% higher than 2019. So we talk about unsustainability, but there's clearly, for a whole bunch of factors as I've outlined, reasons for that demand to continue.
What can we do, Richard, here? A lot of people watching this programme, some of them will be homeowners. They're doing very well, thank you. But, of course, when you move, where you move to is going to be more expensive. But for a lot of people, they'll be thinking, how can my kid buy a house?
On the Homework podcast, I often speak to estate agents that quite clearly say to me, this is great, wow, you've sold your house for X amount of money, isn't it wonderful? However, the next problem is the chain falls apart, quite simply because there is nothing left to buy for somebody that's rubbing their hands with glee because they've achieved such a wonderful price. But, instructions per estate agent at the moment, you can expect an estate agent to have 37 houses on their books at the moment. Yeah. There is no stock. There is literally no stock. What can we do? Your earlier conversation with Justin and John about interest rates and inflation running away a little bit at the moment. At the moment, we're in the perfect storm or the perfect dream, if you like, in the housing industry. We have cheap money. We have lowest interest rates of all time. I mean, I spotted a 0.85% for 2 years. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Great if you can get the deposit.
Absolutely.
What about if you can't get the deposit?
If you can't, then
you need a 30%,
the trouble.
50% deposit to access that.
In my opinion, Liam, there needs to be some sort of incentive to start. The stamp duty holiday was OK. I don't think it was the ideal answer to remedy this problem.
In the end, it just boosts the demand side,
Absolutely.
right? And what we need is more supply. Russell, what we need is more supply. You and I have had this conversation many times. Just briefly, how are we going to get more housing supply so prices don't crash, but prices gradually come more in line with earnings so more ordinary people can actually buy a place to live?
Yeah, well, firstly, we can't have a one-size-fits-all policy, which it seems that we do. There are different levels of demand in different parts of the country. Even London itself has hugely differing demands for types of property, tenures of property, borough to borough. So I think we've got to start thinking more intelligently about where that new build property supply needs to actually be. But the other thing is, you and I have rehearsed before, Liam, is we can't rely on the top 10 house builders in this country who, in fairness to them, obviously are there to satisfy their shareholders and make profit. But those top 10 build between 50 and 60% of the entire output of the UK. So if they decide to pull the drawbridge up and stop building because, let's say, prices soften in a particular area, then we're literally at their behest. So what I suggest is the government gets building themselves, not just council houses, but all types of housing. I think they should set up their own building output operation to compete with the developers and therefore build the right properties in the right places at the right time. That's what needs to happen.
All very interesting. This conversation will continue. Russell Quirk, Richard Black here in the studio. Two people who, when it comes to property, really know their stuff. Thanks for that discussion. To be continued. Now, it's over 2 weeks since Storm Arwen left 240,000 people without power in the northeast of England. While the storm-driven headlines have stopped, there are still people in the region relying on generators, and they'll continue to do so, they're told, throughout the Christmas period. As Northern Power Grid continues to work towards full power restoration, communities in very rural Northumberland are still clearing up the aftermath and dealing with the consequences of Storm Arwen. Here's our North East reporter, Rachel Sweeney.
Storm Arwen ripped through the northeast of England 18 days ago. Roads remain obstructed, the landscape looks destroyed, and local people are trying to keep the area moving. That's despite power blackouts as Northern Power Grid works to complete full restoration.
As a farmer driving around, it's disheartening to see 300-year-old trees that have just been uprooted, snapped. Not just one or two, we've got 15 big beeches, 4 big oaks, 200 acres of trees that have, that we've grown over 40 years, have gone flat overnight.
Jamie Wood had guests staying at 5 of his holiday huts when winds of 98 miles per hour tore through Prendwick. He managed to get customers to safety, but he did lose 3 cows, and he's still unsure how many sheep survived. Despite his own struggles, he supplied 3 other families with generators for free.
There's one chap still got one generator that's running his fridges for his meat business. Another lady delivered a generator back 2 days ago. She had it for a week. I gave them out. They were sitting in the shed, so people had no electric for a week. What's giving a generator for a week, to someone who's got no power? When you've got fridges full of meat, you can't afford to lose all that meat.
Storms Arwen and Barra made national headlines for just a few days, but the reality is that weeks later, people here are still relying on generators and goodwill. In some parts of Northumberland, the only way to pass through roads is by tractor or quad bike.
Northern Power Grid has been criticised for its response to Storm Arwen, and an investigation is underway by regulator Ofgem.
It's been absolutely atrocious. We've been overlooked. We haven't had the backup, we haven't had the resources. It's been horrendous for people living in the countryside. We've had people in isolation for 10, 12 days without electricity, no power, no heating, no cooking, no kettles. It's been an absolute disaster. It was only on the Tuesday, Wednesday, I was getting emails in telling me that they're going to put it back on in an hour or 3 hours. So if you didn't have electricity, how did you get connected to the internet? Imagine what would have happened if for 12 days there was no electricity in London. This is what people up here have had to suffer.
Northern Power Grid has apologised to customers and said teams are changing the way they communicate with customers in power outages. But there's one thing that will never change, and that's a rural community's determination to pull together and recover.
That was Rachel Sweeney in Northumberland, the Queen of the North East. And it's time now for my daily interview series. It's Money Talks. Guest is Ivan Kaimer, the CEO of the online careers platform Spieler. Spieler is a UK-based company which helps people get their first step on the career ladder, connecting companies to a pool of hard-working individuals. And on Spieler's new partner portal, people can share their opinions and thoughts on a wide range of topics, from mental health to remote working. And here to tell us more, it's Ivan Kaimer. Very nice to see you in the studio. Glad you're here. So tell me how you started this company. What made you want to do it?
Yeah, so, a bit about me. And so Speedo's an online collaborative workplace, as you said, connecting people to opportunities. The way I got into it was, funny enough, I got into a bit of trouble doing things I shouldn't have done when I was younger, right? And
Didn't we all?
And I needed that support, and I needed that guidance, which I was lacking, right? So I was very fortunate to get that at a key time in my life. And then through that, I was able to kind of progress in my career and get to where I need to get to, but also with a keen eye on giving back to my community and wondering how I can open doors for others. And that's really how Speedo was born.
So tell me how the business works and what it comprises at the moment.
So simple. It's a social network. People can come in, they can share, they can talk, they can collaborate. In particular, people of colour can come in and talk about their work experiences, their highs, their lows, their wins, their learning points. And we can come, communicate, talk, gather as a community. And then we invite partner organisations who provide job opportunities where we can help with their messaging and help them connect and tap into our diverse pool of opportunities and people. And that way they can apply for jobs, kind of do skills training, workplace training, get support, get guidance, and really work on diversifying their portfolios to get more people of colour into job opportunities.
Now, is the website, is it mainly for workers, employers from the black community, BAME, black, Asian, minority, ethnic, or is it broader than that?
A diverse pool,
yeah.
But funny enough, our audience members and the ones, based on our demographics are people of colour, in particular, black people from underprivileged communities who come in. But we are inclusive of absolutely everybody.
Sure.
Yeah, we aim to really tackle a lot of the grassroots issues that go on and occur within these communities and look at where our issues coming from. In particular, STEM. So we know that for many people in the black community, STEM is not really a prevalent topic, so we try to...
Yeah, these are school subjects like science, technology, mathematics, engineering, the kind of hard subjects that lead to well-paid jobs.
Exactly that.
Which youngsters, often don't get that stuff at school, do they?
Exactly. I mean, in the next 5 years, there will be 60% of all jobs will be automated. So it's vital that people learn how to build. And the best way to do that is within tech, within science. These fields where you're able to build and grow and really succeed and really change the world and be innovative, right? So we want to expose people to that, open that opportunity, open that door, and get them that direct access to these higher tier fields and jobs. But first comes with the training. So that's what we're kind of working at with these organisations.
Now, you can't promote the community relations, the employment that you want to, Ivan, unless the business is sustainable, and that can't happen unless it makes money. So how do you make your money? Do you charge employers to register on the site? Do you charge would-be employees to register on the site, or how does it work?
Now, the company's always going to be free. The website is always going to be free right, for members. So members come in, they can come in for free, get the support, kind of talk and build a community. All right. Now, for our partners, so the organisations, the employers, we charge them a subscription fee for
there'd be charge search fees by any executive, any labour agency, exchange.
Exactly.
Anyway,
So we've done a lot of homework, right, and we've seen the competitive angle and how much our competitors charge, and where we kind of, our selling point for us is we want to undercut that, so kind of offering a much more generous rate to show them grow with us. We don't just want to take your money. We want to grow with you, grow together, diversify your messaging, your means, and kind of connect with you on a much deeper level than just, taking the money, here's a transaction, and that's it. We want to build relations, and through that and through our work, expose and create more opportunities and open more doors for people.
Now, here on the show, we look at the headline unemployment numbers, the vacancy numbers. It looks as if it's all rosy. Unemployment's low, vacancies are sky high, over 1 million, almost 1.5 million, record numbers. What's the labour market reality that you see, Ivan, on the ground among people who might be struggling a little bit, who are trying to get into the labour force, particularly into and during the pandemic?
Well, what people fail to account for is that, there are a lot of unemployment's low, but there's lots of 0-hour contracts. These are lots of freelance contract temp roles that are not really sustainable, that well under minimum wage as well, right? And people are having to pick up more jobs and more opportunities and learn more skills. Therefore, it takes more time just to survive, right? So for us, the labour market we want to manage is equality for everybody. We know that talent is available in everybody, but opportunity isn't. So what we want to do is just level the playing ground. We just want people to have a fair opportunity and a fair shot of getting a chance, and reduce employers' messaging in which a person of colour may see and immediately rule it out and know that, this isn't for me. And whereas, in fairness to an employer, they may not know that they're even being discriminative in their messaging when it comes to posting opportunities. So we want to work on that and just make it inclusive and give everybody a fair shot. That's what we intend to do.
Mate, you're clearly a very bright guy. A lot of people would employ you. You've got a lot of talents. You're very articulate. You set up a business. From what I can see, it's doing pretty well. Do you feel there is still discrimination, though, from people from your from the black community here in the UK?
Oh, very, very, very much so. I can't.
And is that partly what's motivating you to set up your website and to run your business, to try and give people from the BAME community a bit more of a fair crack of the whip?
Definitely. I mean, if you look at me, I'm a 6'8", 260-pound man. Initially, people are going to have their...
Not many people make me feel small, mate.
Exactly. People are going to have their preconceived notions of me, unfortunately. They're going to assume that, you know, this guy... I can't tell you how many times I hear, are you a basketball player? Are you an athlete or a sports star? I'm much more than that, in all due respect. Yeah. And what we want to do is also knock down those stereotypes to get rid of that colour barrier, that line barrier, and to show, you know, I'm way more than what I originally look like. Judge me on my merit. Judge me on what I can do as opposed to just how I look like. And unfortunately, for people in the black community, they face a lot of that discrimination daily. So, and I am someone that has faced that, but I've been fortunate to get to where I am now. So I want to open those doors. I want to knock those stereotypes and make sure employers trust employees, as well as employees trust their members. It has to work both ways for diversity and our community to grow together.
Very, very briefly, why should a business leader watching this show subscribe to your website if they want good labour?
Because if you want diversification, statistics and everything show more diversification means more wealth and more growth for yourself. And it also means you're doing something good. I mean, we talk to so many employers that want to give back, right? That want to do more for the community. This is your chance, this is your opportunity where we can work on your messaging, work on helping and taking away a lot of stress for you while making sure that you are diversifying your means and, of course, building more wealth and opportunities for other people.
Ivan Keimer, you're always welcome here on The Money. Good to see you. Ivan Keimer there, who founded the website, the employment website, Spieler. You've been watching On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. Thanks for joining me today. We'll be back for more economics, business and consumer news at 1 p.m. tomorrow, examining the Bank of England's latest decision on interest rates, which is due at midday. But for now, this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Most of the country having a dry day today. There's a little bit of rain here and there, but in the outlook, much of the UK will stay dry into the weekend and perhaps beyond. But it is going to turn colder and increasingly we're going to see fog patches. This weather front is providing some rain today and tomorrow, but this large area of high pressure is moving in, and that is why it is turning drier for all of us, really, from Thursday onwards. Back to today, though, there's some patchy rain from that weather front over Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, the far northwest of England. Some sunny spells over Yorkshire, down into Lincolnshire, parts of the North Midlands, but generally cloudy across the south. Good spells of sunshine across the north, just 1 or 2 showers around the middle of the day in Shetland. Temperatures above average as well, another mild day, especially in the south. 13, a 14 is just about possible. We'll keep some outbreaks of rain, though, going across southwest Scotland, the north of Northern Ireland into this evening. That rain just trickling northwards as we go through the night, so becoming dry across northwest England. Maybe the odd spot of rain over the mountains in North Wales, but generally a dry night where skies are clearest across parts of northeast England. Pockets of frost possible. Certainly some fog is likely in this area, parts of East Yorkshire, North Yorkshire down into Lincolnshire. And if we do see some fog, it could last for most of Thursday. Generally, though, it's just going to be a cloudy but dry day. Some rain in the far north of Scotland, certainly initially, but even here that's pushing away to the north as the breeze picks up. Eastern parts, so northeast England, eastern Scotland, seeing the best of any sunny spells as long as that fog does clear. And again, temperatures perhaps not quite as high as today, but still on the mild side for the time of year. Not a great deal of change during Thursday. The high pressure is moving in, so a lot of dry weather. Where we see breaks in the cloud, we could see some pockets of frost and, again, some fog patches forming. And that's going to be the issue of the next few days and into the weekend. A lot of dry weather, a lot of cloud, but there will be some fog. And where that fog sticks, well, it really will feel pretty cold.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's time